The Galactic Council chambers had seen better days. Actually, they had seen better centuries. The grand marble floors were scuffed from countless diplomatic boots. The ornate ceiling bore scorch marks from that unfortunate incident with the Pyrothian ambassador. And the air recycling system wheezed like an old man climbing stairs. But today the chamber hosted what could generously be called a diplomatic discussion, or more accurately, a slow-motion train wreck with subtitles. Ambassador Kree-Da of the Vorthak Empire stood at one podium, all 8 feet of scaled, armored intimidation. His species had evolved from apex predators, and it showed. Every word he spoke sounded like a declaration of war, even when he was ordering lunch. The blood of our ancestors cries out for satisfaction, he bellowed, his translator device struggling to keep up. We shall not rest until our enemies taste the bitter ash of defeat. Across the chamber, Councillor Blix of the Zolonian Republic adjusted her 17 pairs of spectacles with mechanical precision. The Zolonians were a species that had bureaucratized evolution itself, developing redundant organs for redundant paperwork. Per Article 247, subsection 12C of the Interstellar Commerce Regulatory Framework, she intoned, "We must insist upon comprehensive documentation of all proposed hostile activities, filed in triplicate with the appropriate regulatory bodies." Mediator Prime Yolanda Reeves sat between them, her human head in her human hands, wondering why she had ever left her nice, quiet job as a tax attorney. At least the IRS only threatened to audit you. These two species were mobilizing fleets over what she was pretty sure was a disagreement about shipping rates. "Let me get this straight," Yolanda said, her voice carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who had explained the same thing 47 times. "Ambassador Kree-Da, you want to establish peaceful trade relations with exclusive shipping rights through the Zorian Nebula. We demand the right to crush our enemies and claim victory over the star paths," Kree-Da corrected, pounding his fist on the podium hard enough to crack it. "Right. And Councillor Blix, you want to establish peaceful trade relations with exclusive shipping rights through the Zorian Nebula. We require formal acknowledgement of our legitimate commercial interests as outlined in the Galactic Trade Standardization Act of 2387, Blix replied, shuffling through a stack of papers thick enough to stop a laser blast. Yolanda stared at them both. They were saying the exact same thing. But somehow, their translators, their cultural differences, and their sheer commitment to making simple things complicated had turned a basic trade agreement into the prelude to galactic war. The previous 47 interpreters had all failed spectacularly. The first 36 had quit. The 37th had suffered a nervous breakdown. The 38th through 47th had been politely escorted out after accidentally making things worse. The 47th had somehow convinced both sides that the other species reproduced by eating their young, which was both disturbing and completely false. Now both fleets were positioned at the edge of the Zorian Nebula, weapons powered but not yet targeted, waiting for these negotiations to conclude. The first galactic war in 3 centuries hung in the balance, and it was all because nobody could figure out how to say "let's make money together" in a way that both sides understood. Marcus Johnson arrived 23 minutes late to the Galactic Council chambers, carrying a cup of coffee that had gone cold during his commute and wearing the expression of a man who had dealt with worse things than potential interstellar war. His resume was unconventional for a galactic interpreter: 5 years of customer service at a telecommunications company, 2 years as a hotel concierge, and one memorable afternoon where he had accidentally prevented a trade dispute between the Centauri Collective and the Rigel Consortium by telling them both to quit being ridiculous and just split the shipping costs. That afternoon had somehow landed him on the Galactic Council's emergency contact list, which was how he found himself walking into a chamber that looked like a cross between the United Nations and a very expensive funeral home. "Sorry I'm late," Marcus said, settling into the interpreter's chair with the casual ease of someone who had learned that most crises were just regular problems with better marketing. Traffic was murder. Apparently there's some kind of fleet buildup near the Zorian Nebula that's got everyone's hyperspace lanes backed up. Yolanda looked at him with the desperate hope of someone who had just spotted a life preserver. Marcus, thank God. We have a situation. I figured. When the Galactic Council calls, it's usually not to chat about the weather. Marcus took a sip of his cold coffee and grimaced. So what's the problem? These two having a fight about something stupid again. Again? Kritha's voice boomed across the chamber. Human, you dare to suggest that the honor of the Vorthak Empire is trivial? Oh, it's definitely about honor, Marcus nodded sagely. And let me guess, he turned to Blix, you're concerned about proper procedures and regulatory compliance. The structural integrity of interstellar commerce depends upon adherence to established protocols, Blix replied, which Marcus had learned was Zolonian for yes, but with more words. Marcus turned back to Yolanda. Okay, so we've got Mr. Honor and Glory over here and MS. Paperwork and procedures over there, and they're arguing about something they both actually want. How close are we to shooting? Both fleets are in position. They're waiting for these negotiations to conclude before they decide whether to trade or fight. And how long have they been negotiating? 14 months. Marcus blinked. 14 months? To decide whether to fight or do business? What exactly are they arguing about? Yolanda handed him a tablet displaying the negotiation summary. Marcus scrolled through it, his expression growing increasingly incredulous. Wait, they both want the same trade routes. They both want to ship the same goods. They both want to make money. They both want to avoid conflict. And they've been arguing about it for over a year? Cultural differences, Yolanda explained weakly. Cultural differences, Marcus repeated, looking from Kritha to Blix and back again. Right, so one guy says let's do business like he's announcing the apocalypse, and the other one says it like she's reading a tax code. And somehow this has turned into a potential war. The honor of our ancestors demands, Kritha began. The regulatory framework requires, Blix interrupted. Okay, Marcus held up his hands. I get it. You're both very committed to your respective styles of making simple things complicated. But here's the thing, and I want you both to really listen to this. You're about to fight a war over something you both want. That's not honor or proper procedure. That's just stupid. The chamber fell silent. Even the air recycling system seemed to pause its wheezing. Did he just call us stupid? Kritha asked, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. I believe the human has questioned our intellectual capacity, Blix confirmed, her spectacles clicking as she adjusted them nervously. Marcus took another sip of his terrible coffee. But, well, this should be interesting. Marcus cracked his knuckles and activated the translator interface. All right, folks, let's try this again. But this time we're going to use what I like to call the Marcus translation protocol. It's very simple. I'm going to tell you what you're actually saying instead of what you think you're saying. Kritha straightened to his full imposing height. Very well, human. Translate this: we, the mighty Vorthak Empire, shall sweep across the star paths like a cosmic hurricane, crushing all who oppose our righteous advance until the very stars themselves bow before our inevitable victory. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. He says he wants to make money shipping stuff and doesn't want anyone to rip him off. That is not what I said, Kritha protested, his scales bristling. Sure it is. You just said it like you were announcing the end of the universe. But underneath all the cosmic hurricane stuff, you want exclusive shipping rights so you can turn a profit without competition. Am I wrong? Kritha opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Then opened it again. The honor of our empire is tied to economic success, right? You want to provide for your people, maintain your strength, and be respected by other species, all of which requires money, which comes from trade, which is what this whole thing is about. Counselor Blix cleared her throat with the precision of a metronome. If I may interject, The human's interpretation lacks the nuanced understanding of our position. Per the Galactic Trade Standardization Act, we require comprehensive assurance of non-hostile commercial practices, with full documentation of all proposed activities, subject to review by the appropriate regulatory bodies. Marcus turned to her. She says she also wants to make money shipping stuff and doesn't want anyone to rip her off. That is a gross oversimplification of our legitimate concerns regarding. Lady, I spent 5 years in customer service. I know oversimplification when I see it, and I know bureaucratic padding when I hear it. You want the same thing he wants. A good deal that won't screw you over. You just want it in writing in triplicate, with a notary public and probably a blood test. Both aliens stared at him. The silence stretched until even the air recycling system seemed uncomfortable. Look, Marcus continued, I get it. You're both proud species with rich cultural traditions and complex social structures. But right now you're doing that thing where you order a cheeseburger by saying I require a circular protein disc enhanced with dairy product, assembled between 2 units of processed grain matter, prepared according to traditional thermal application methods. It's still just a cheeseburger. Are you comparing interstellar commerce to fast food? Blix asked, her voice carrying the horrified fascination of someone watching a traffic accident. I'm comparing your communication style to ordering fast food. You're both asking for the same cheeseburger, but one of you is doing it like you're declaring war on cows, and the other one is doing it like you're filing a lawsuit against bread. Kretha's laugh was like a landslide with a sense of humor. The human has a point. We do sound ridiculous. The human's methodology is unorthodox but surprisingly effective, Blix admitted, adjusting her spectacles thoughtfully. Marcus smiled. Great. Now that we've established that you're both reasonable people who want reasonable things, can we maybe skip the part where you blow each other up and get straight to the part where you make money together? Marcus had been in the galactic diplomacy business for exactly 47 minutes, and he was already developing the particular brand of exhaustion that came from watching intelligent beings work very hard to misunderstand each other. Okay, let's try this differently, he said, pulling up a holographic display. I'm going to list what you both actually want, and you're going to tell me if I'm wrong. Fair enough? Both aliens nodded, though Kretha's nod looked more like a threat, and Blix's nod came with a small stack of paperwork. First, you both want to use the trade routes through the Zorian Nebula because they're the fastest way to ship goods between your territories. The star paths must be claimed for the glory of Kretha began. The strategic commercial advantages of the Zorian passage are well documented in our economic impact assessment, Blix interrupted. Right, so yes on the trade routes, Marcus said, checking a box on his display. Second, you both want to ship the same types of goods, rare minerals, manufactured equipment, and luxury items because that's where the money is. Our merchants require access to the wealth of the galaxy to fuel our eternal expansion. Our commercial interests encompass a diverse portfolio of high-value commodities as outlined in Trade Manifest 4471b. Yes on the profitable goods, Marcus checked another box. Third, you both want to avoid getting screwed over by unfair deals, price manipulation, or trade restrictions. We will not suffer the dishonor of exploitation. We require comprehensive protections against anti-competitive practices. Yes on not getting ripped off. Check. Fourth, you both want this to be a long-term, stable arrangement that benefits both your species. A treaty that will endure until the stars grow cold. A sustainable commercial framework with built-in review mechanisms. Yes on making this work long-term. Check. Marcus looked up from his display. So you both want the same routes to ship the same stuff with fair terms and a deal that lasts. And you've been arguing about this for 14 months. Why exactly? The silence that followed was the kind that made people question their life choices. This is, Yolanda whispered, this is actually working. Of course it's working, Marcus said, his customer service training fully activated now. Look, I've dealt with people arguing about phone bills for 3 hours when the whole problem could be solved with a $5 credit. I've watched hotel guests threaten to call corporate because their room had a view of the parking lot instead of the garden, when both rooms cost the same and they only cared about the Wi-Fi password. People, and apparently aliens, have a talent for making simple things complicated. He turned to face both aliens directly. Here's the thing you're both missing. You're not enemies. You're potential business partners who speak different languages. Not literally, the translators handle that fine. But culturally, you're speaking different languages, and instead of learning each other's languages, you've been assuming the other guy is an idiot. The human makes a valid point, Krita rumbled. Perhaps we have been too quick to assume hostile intent. Our assessment protocols may have been overly cautious, Blix admitted. Though proper caution is always advisable when entering into commercial relationships. See? You're already agreeing with each other. Now, here's what's going to happen, Marcus said, and something in his voice made both aliens straighten up. You're going to work out the details of this trade agreement. Not the honor and glory version, not the 17 subsections and a rider version. The actual, practical, this is how we make money and not kill each other version. He paused, looking from one to the other. Because right now, both your fleets are sitting out there, armed and ready, waiting for you to decide whether you're going to be business partners or corpses. And frankly, corpses are terrible at commerce. The weight of that statement settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Both aliens realized, perhaps for the first time, how close they had come to destroying everything they actually wanted. Marcus checked his watch. Also, I have dinner plans at 7, so let's try to wrap this up before the shooting starts. The moment had arrived. Marcus could feel it in the air, that crystalline instant when everything balanced on a knife's edge. Both alien fleets hung in space, weapons powered, waiting for the final word from the negotiations. In the chamber, Krita and Blix stared at each other across the divide of 14 months of miscommunication and cultural stubbornness. All right, Marcus said, standing up from his chair. I'm going to say something now, and I want both of you to really listen. Not with your translator devices, not through your cultural filters, not with your pride or your procedures. Just listen. The chamber fell silent. Even the wheezing air recycler held its breath. Marcus looked at Krita, then at Blix, then back again. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of absolute simplicity. You're both scared. The words hung in the air like a revelation. You're scared that if you make a deal, the other guy will take advantage of you. You're scared that your own people will think you're weak for compromising. You're scared that this whole thing is going to blow up in your face and you'll be the one who gets blamed. So instead of saying, hey, let's work together and make some money, you've spent over a year trying to sound tough and smart and important, and now you're about to fight a war over a business deal because you're too scared to admit you want the same thing. The silence that followed was different from any silence that had ever existed in the Galactic Council chambers. It wasn't the silence of confusion or anger or diplomatic maneuvering. It was the silence of recognition, the moment when someone holds up a mirror and you see yourself clearly for the first time. Krita's massive frame seemed to deflate slightly. The expectations of my people are to provide for them and keep them safe and prosperous, Marcus finished, which is exactly what a good trade deal would do. Blix removed all 17 pairs of spectacles and rubbed her eyes. The regulatory framework exists to protect our interests. And your interests are to make money safely without getting screwed over, Marcus nodded. Which is exactly what a good trade deal would do. The silence spread beyond the chamber. On the bridge of the Vorthak flagship, Admiral Gorthak found himself staring out at the Zolonian fleet and wondering when exactly he had started thinking of them as the enemy instead of potential customers. On the Zolonian command vessel, Fleet Coordinator Vex Illa was reviewing the combat projections and realizing that even if they won, they would lose everything they had hoped to gain. The communication channels between the fleets crackled with an unusual sound. Nothing. No threats, no ultimatums, no last-minute diplomatic posturing. Just the vast silence of space and the gradual understanding that they were all about to do something monumentally stupid. "You know what the funny thing is?" Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying to every corner of the chamber. "In about 6 months, if you actually do this deal, you're going to be making so much money together that you'll wonder why you ever thought about fighting. You'll be complaining about shipping schedules and tax rates and whether the coffee in the joint trade stations is any good. You'll be arguing about normal business stuff like normal business partners." He paused, looking at both of them with something approaching fondness. "Instead of sitting and smoking wreckage, wondering what the hell you were thinking." The silence stretched on, no longer uncomfortable but contemplative. 2 civilizations, hundreds of ships, millions of lives, all balanced on the edge of a moment that could go either way. Finally, Krithas spoke, his voice subdued but steady. I believe we may have been overthinking this. Our analytical framework may have been suboptimal," Blix agreed quietly. Marcus nodded and sat back down. "Great. So, who wants to go first with the actual negotiation? And remember, we're going for simple business deal, not epic space opera." For the first time in 14 months, both aliens smiled. 6 months later, Marcus was sitting in his new office, an actual office with a window that looked out on actual space, which still struck him as mildly ridiculous, when his communication device buzzed with the opening notes of what had become a very familiar tune. The sound of another impossible diplomatic crisis. The Vorthax-Zilonian peace and trade agreement had become the stuff of legend. Not just because it had prevented a galactic war, but because it actually worked. The trade routes through the Zorion Nebula hummed with activity. Both species were making ridiculous amounts of money, and their biggest arguments now centered around who had to clean the bathrooms at the joint shipping stations. The Marcus translation protocol had become required reading at the Galactic Diplomatic Academy. The basic principle, say what you actually mean instead of what you think you should mean, had revolutionized interstellar relations. Several wars had been averted when negotiators started asking, "But what do you really want?" Instead of parsing the cultural significance of 17 different ways to say maybe. Marcus Johnson, Department of Common Sense Diplomacy, he answered the comm, still finding his job title faintly absurd. "Mr. Johnson," came a voice that sounded like it belonged to someone who had learned to speak by reading instruction manuals. "We have a situation that requires your unique expertise." "Let me guess," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. 2 or more species are having a completely avoidable argument about something they all actually want, and they've been making it worse by trying to sound impressive instead of honest. That is remarkably accurate. It always is. What's the topic this time? The Andromedans and the Centaurians are disputing territorial rights to a star system. The Andromedans claim it by right of cosmic destiny manifesting through stellar inheritance. The Centaurians claim it by adherence to the universal principles of celestial jurisdiction as established by the Galactic Territorial Accords of 2341. Marcus rubbed his temples. And what's actually in this star system that they both want? 3 habitable planets with excellent mining potential and strategic value for trade route establishment. So they both want the same planets for the same reasons, but they're arguing about it using completely different flavors of ridiculous language. That appears to be the situation, yes. And how long have they been negotiating? 18 months. Both fleets are currently positioned at the edge of the system. Marcus sighed the sigh of a man who had found his calling and wasn't entirely sure how he felt about that. "Right, send me the files. I'll be there in 2 hours. Mr. Johnson, if I may ask, how do you do it? How do you see through to what they really want so quickly?" Marcus considered the question. You know, I think it's because I spent so many years dealing with people who were angry about their phone bills. After you've explained to someone for the 15th time that their bill is high because they made $300 worth of international calls, you start to recognize when people are making problems more complicated than they need to be. That seems almost too simple. Most problems are simple, Marcus said, standing up and reaching for his coat. People just like making them complicated because it makes them feel important. The trick is figuring out what they're really afraid of and helping them realize that what they want isn't actually impossible. He paused at the door of his office, looking back at the commendation on his wall, a joint award from the Vortak Empire and the Zolonian Republic for outstanding service in the prevention of cosmic stupidity. Besides, he added, somebody has to keep the galaxy from blowing itself up over shipping disputes. Might as well be the guy who used to deal with cable complaints. As he headed for the transport bay, Marcus reflected on the strange turns life could take. A year ago, he had been explaining to customers why their internet was slow. Now he was preventing interstellar wars by explaining to aliens why their arguments were slow. Same job, really. Just better benefits and a more interesting commute. His comm buzzed again. Another crisis, another species convinced that their particular way of overcomplicating things was the only way to handle the situation. Marcus smiled and quickened his pace. After all, the galaxy wasn't going to save itself from its own bureaucratic nonsense. And somebody had to keep reminding everyone that most of the time, the simple answer was the right answer. Even if it took a former customer service representative to point it out.